Welcome to this episode of the Gunman. So this video here is part 7 on the Murdered LH Torana that we've been doing a full repair and respray on. This video here is going to be focusing on the prep work and edging up the body. So we'll be painting all the inside door jambs on the body. And as always, I'll be going right through every single step and explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing, and also giving you as much technical information as possible. So the previous videos have gone right through how to mix and match the clear coat, the matte clear coat, how to paint over chrome, how to do some rust repairs, the time-lapse video that we did on repair and primer work. We've also painted the insides of the panels. The reason I did decide to paint the whole car back together, a couple of reasons, being that if I was to scratch a color like this, probably a little bit harder to do refinishing on this and get the exact same gloss level, because the final effect that you will actually get with your matte clears will vary greatly depending on application. So if you go and put it on really heavy, you'll probably actually get a little bit more of a gloss out of it. So if I was to go and scratch a panel and then think, okay, well, I've got to repaint this panel, say scratch it when I was putting it back on, then redo it, and I get one of those panels in the middle of the car that looks different, and then I end up having to paint the whole side, and it could just end up getting to be a big problem. So I just thought, for what it's worth, I'll do it right the first time, paint the insides, bolt it all back together, paint it, and then the job's done. This is actually the first time I had ever done a full respray in a matte finish. I'm glad I got the opportunity, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it on such a cool old car as well. So what you've been watching me do here is just blocking the entire car down with some 180 grit. So those who have been following this series will remember that I gave the entire car a really good prime up, 4 coats over all of the repaired areas, and then just 2 coats over the rest of the car just to seal it down. I've obviously kept in mind where the worst of the repairs are. There might be 1 or 2 spots that I have to go around and nip up with a little bit of fine filler before I start blocking. You might have noticed them around that pillar, but I did check over the entire car to make sure there was no little pinholes prior to blocking it down. I prefer to put that filler in before I block it down. I have found that you'll get a much better end result if you do that, because if you end up blocking it down, then sanding it down with 320 and then 500, and then you find your pinholes, and then you put your fine filler in, well, you're like, well, I've already gone to 500, I don't want to go and hit that with 180 grit. But 180 grit will block it down a lot flatter than, say, 500 grit will. So if you were to go and block out your filler with 500 grit, because that's the stage that you're up to, there's a good chance that you'll actually be left with a little bit of a high spot where the filler was. So that's why I do prefer to do it earlier on in the stage, say first rather than last. And once I'm happy that the entire thing's been blocked back down and it's fairly straight, that's when I get the orbital sander out with some 320 grit and the interface pad on it. Obviously, you've noticed that I've got the vacuum cleaner as well, just to keep the most of the dust out of my face and keep the workshop a little bit cleaner. Now, you may be thinking, all you're doing in this video really is painting the insides of the door jambs. Why are you even wasting your time prepping the rest of the car up? There is actually a reason for that. If I was to find a bit that did need a little bit more 2-pack primer, it would be easy to prime that up at the same time that I'm painting the insides. So that's just time management as much as anything. And also, once I've painted the insides, I'm going to want to be leaving that car for the rest of the day in the spray booth. So once I've painted it, I can't continue on working on the car. So this also enables me to get more progress along the job. So what you may have noticed me doing just there is getting halfway through sanding that quarter panel down and realizing that this bit of 320 is probably just getting a little bit too old to remove those 180 grit scratches that I had from blocking it down effectively. Sometimes when a bit of sandpaper gets too old, it just starts polishing and it'll actually sand untrue, so it will sand unevenly. I've had a guy say before, oh man, good work, but you go through too much sandpaper. Well, I pay for the sandpaper myself, and the customer pays for the job. So the way I see it, if they're paying good money to get a good quality job done, I don't mind using a bit of sandpaper on that job. The job does pay for it at the end of the day, and if I believe using an extra 10 bits of sandpaper is going to make for a better job, well then I will. Doesn't mean that I go around wasting sandpaper, because as you can see now, I'm using the older piece on the door jambs where it doesn't matter quite so much that if it is a little bit unevenly sanded and there is a very slight amount of orange peel left. As you see there, I've put my new piece on and continued back on with that quarter panel to remove those 180 grit scratches. You obviously also want to make sure that you're keeping that orbital sander fairly flat. You don't want to start putting it up on the 90-degree angle. If you start doing that, you will just be digging edges into panels. I made a video called Spray Painting for Beginners one day, because once I'd started making these videos, I saw this guy on YouTube and he had this tutorial video showing people how to paint a car, and he was using his orbital sander like it was a chainsaw. So I decided I owed it to the YouTube community and the world to actually right those wrongs and show people how it's done correctly. This video now is one of my most popular videos and it gets over 500 views a day. So once I'd got the 320 grit stage done, I've decided to grab some 400 grit. 400 grit is a good grit to use sometimes for jams like this because it's a single stage, so it's coarse enough to still cut into that orange peel, but it's fine enough to actually still be able to paint over. So if I was to go 320, it would cut that orange peel down a lot quicker, but it would be a little bit coarse to want to paint over. So you'd want to go over the top of that with some 500 grit or even some 400 grit, depending on the kind of paint that you're using and the kind of finish that you're looking for. But for this instance, it was 400 grit. That will always change. So I've got a very wide range of sandpapers, and I do use some of them more than others, but I do use just about every single one of those sandpapers that I've got there in that very wide range. Once all those edges have been sanded down and I'm happy with my prep work, I'll give it a really good blowdown and then re-inspect it. Just because you think you've gone over it one time doesn't mean that you've got everything that first time, and that's from someone who's been doing this for an extremely long time. You can always miss stuff. It doesn't mean that you're an idiot or you're stupid. It just means that you're human and you're not a robot that gets everything the first time. So blow it down, recheck your work. You may have noticed that little motivation can just there. That's my little drink bottle that I get the pre-workout powder in. And I tell you what, I absolutely smashed this job out. I think I did it in like definitely less than 2 weeks, but I remember something like 8 days. It was probably about 6 months ago that I did do this job, and those that have been following it will remember that I did do 4 episodes on it and then just left it for a while. Reason being, I just moved on and started editing up other videos and just sort of forgot about it. But then I started making my website and I was putting together a section that was called projects, and I was looking through some of my older videos and I thought, oh man, that LH Torana, I've actually got a couple of videos that all I needed was narration, so I got back onto them, and then after doing that I decided, you know what, this car deserves a full video set on it. So I have been having a bit of time off here in Thailand at the moment. I've been forcing myself to do 1 video every day until the entire video set has been finished off. I have been having a bit of fun doing it, but let me tell you now, these videos do not edit themselves. And I've been here for 2 weeks already and spending like probably more than a full-time job working on my YouTube channel, making videos, upgrading my website, having a great time doing it. But it really does take a lot of time and effort to keep this YouTube channel up and running. Hope you guys do appreciate it, and make sure you do go over and check out my website, which I have been spending lots and lots of time on, thegunman.net.au. So obviously once all the prep work has been done, I've then put it in the booth after giving it a really good sweep out, and then put some water down on the floor because it's a dry floor booth and it's only a semi-down dry, so it's got a little filter in up the top. Make sure I get a bit of water down on the floor. That will actually help all the overspray stick to the floor. I've also got a booth coating on the walls which stays sticky. I've actually got another video on that if you'd like to see that. It's called Spray Booth Service, so check through my videos and you'll be able to find that one. Then next up, just giving it a bit of a edge mask before we throw some plastic over the top of it, and then we'll cut it out with a razor blade. This is my favorite part, the masking. I always like to keep it nice and tight, keep your masking nice and neat, but I really do find this a good job. I just leave the booth door open, have the tunes cranking, and just get stuck into it. I like to put the masking tape over my wrist. I find it a really quick way of getting the masking tape off the roll and onto the panel. I feel sorry for anybody with fat wrists that can't fit a roll of masking tape over their hand, because I can imagine it would make masking a lot more difficult for me and a lot more time consuming. I got the idea off a tradesman that I used to work with when I was a 1st or 2nd year apprentice. I used to laugh at him when I saw him do it the first time, and then I actually found out that I could fit it on my wrist, and after a little bit I found out that it was definitely the best way of masking. So if you can fit a roll of masking tape over your wrist, I highly recommend giving it a shot. All the underneath of this car had already been nice and neatly painted with underbody protection, so I didn't want to go and get this messy overspray under there. So as you can see, I've masked it up properly, and I've also made it so that I can get my paint right up under the entire sill without having any dry spots. I've actually decided to change my video schedule, so you'll be able to look forward to videos on Saturday and Wednesday from now on. And if I've been really busy, which I have been lately, and I'm actually like a month ahead, if I'm ever more than a month ahead on my videos, well then I'll be putting an extra video up on Monday. So what I do is I get creative and I just get into my videos, and I've got a little bit of an addicted personality, and I'll just go and make heaps. And then there are times that I really just cannot even stand the sight of my computer. It makes me lethargic, it just makes me tired, and I just can't bring myself to open up the video editor to actually make another video. But that's, I guess, maybe sometimes when I'm extremely busy at work at the same time, because sometimes coming home to make videos about work definitely does feel like work. Whereas at the moment I am having a month off before I do move to Bangkok and do start working again. The videos will also be 8 AM Bangkok time now, so not midday Perth time, so you'll get them a few hours earlier than what you have previously been getting them. Take note that I'm painting the inside of these windscreen pillars as well, because I own one of these cars. I do remember that you see them, and I always remember looking at mine thinking, geez, that's ugly, it would be good to have a nice clean coat of paint on it. Also, always like to use a nice sharp razor blade. Once they get too old, just throw them out. They're only worth like 20 cents each, so you know, you might get a couple of jobs out of them, start getting blunt, throw it out, grab a new one, or put it to the side. It might still be good to cut some cardboard up or something, but when you're cutting your plastic, you really want to cut it right the first time, rather than hacking into it like a butter knife and make an absolute mess out of your plastic. Then you probably end up just getting holes in it and little areas where you will start getting overspray. Probably also noticed I do a bit of folding too, so sometimes cut that bit of plastic a bit bigger and then fold it to the correct size. As you can see here for the quarter panel where it hits the jam there, I just use my little false edge masking trick, which is just a bit of 3/4 inch masking tape, which I just flipped over the edge of and then ran it across my knee. I do have other videos that go a bit more into detail on how to do that if you'd like to check them out too. Anyway, once that's done, as you may have noticed, I wiped it down with wax and grease remover before I masked it. So I didn't bother about wiping it down with wax and grease remover again after masking it. All I'm doing now is getting my seam sealer on. So there was little bits of rust and flaky old seam sealer all around the gaps and the panel joins on this car, so I ground them back with my little roll-lock grinder, which is like a 90-degree angle grinder type thing. And then I treated all that rust, as you guys probably remember from the earlier videos on this car, and now I'm just re-seam sealing it with some good Sikaflex seam sealer. There are some really crap seam sealers out there, but most of them are okay. We used one called Car Systems. It was actually at this workshop before we got there, and it's absolute garbage. As soon as you start putting a coat of paint over it, it just starts separating and making an absolute mess out of your paint job that you've spent a long time working on. But what I did end up doing was just letting it dry out and then just dusting it on and dusting it on, and I was able to just get away with it. But yeah, we used that once and then that was it, never used it again. Then we got onto the Sikaflex sealer, and this stuff is absolutely awesome, never had a problem. You don't really even need to let it flash off at all. You can put it on, be careful when you're tack ragging, and then paint straight over it. Don't underestimate the importance of seam sealer, because I actually did my own car one day and I had a truck reverse into my bonnet, and I've got a Taiwanese bonnet, so just a cheapy, you know, $100 bonnet for it. And I painted it. I just thought, you know what? Seam seal is probably all overrated. I used to always have to do it on just about every single bonnet, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to save a couple of minutes. I'm not even going to worry about seam sealing it. And sure enough, within a year, not even that, there was little bits of rust coming through all underneath the bonnet. So yeah, I know firsthand it is a very important stage, so make sure you do seal up those gaps properly. We're actually pretty lucky over here in Australia. We've got a hot, dry climate in most of the country. If you go up north into Queensland and the Kimberley over there in Western Australia, well then yes, you do have a bit more humidity and the cars probably don't last quite as long, but most of the south of Australia is a hot, dry climate, which is good for preserving old cars. This is a 1975 model, and I would venture to say that most 75 model cars over in England or Europe would not be in this good condition and not readily available for anyone just to buy one and do up with minimal rust damage on it considering its age. Anyway, as you probably noticed just before, I gave the entire thing a really good tack rag down. I was being extra careful not to hit that seam sealer. Some people do prefer to put their seam sealer on the night before, or even maybe give it a bake out before painting it. I have found that it's not really necessary, and I get just as good results without baking it and painting straight over the fresh seam sealer. That's the way I was taught by my tradesman when I was learning how to paint, and it does work, trust me. This is a bit of a favourite gun of mine, the DeVilbiss SGK 600 BV, also known in parts of the world as the DeVilbiss FLG5. I believe it's actually more widely known as the FLG5 because over in the UK, which obviously has a bigger population than Australia, it is known as the FLG5. But if you pull your FLG5 apart, you'll actually see that on the needle, it will actually say SGK on it. The reason I do like this gun so much is because of its price. That's what really gets me there, but also how good it sprays. I've got loads and loads of people onto this gun, and it is an absolute winner in my books. It wins on just about every level. It's able to get a totally awesome finish. You can use it for clear coat, base coat, 2K color. It's built well and will last a lifetime as long as you look after it. It's made in Brazil, so to top quality standards. It's not like it's a cheap Chinese or Taiwanese rip-off spray gun that you'll use 1 or 2 times and then it will not work for you after. I like to have that fan wound right open, but you'll be able to find the sweet spot depending on what you're painting. Just close it right up and start opening it up until you get a nice amount of fan and a nice amount of paint coming out. One of the first things that I did notice when I was using this SGK the first few times, that it felt like it had a lot less of a trigger pull than what I was used to with the GTIs and the Pro Lights and stuff like that. But it ends up that it's not really an issue. You're still able to get a nice amount of paint out, but I do find myself leaving that fluid wound just about right open no matter what I'm painting. Base coat, clear coat, 2K color, just leave it wound right open and set that regular from 20 to 25 psi. Don't forget that your fan setting will actually alter the pressure setting. So if you've got the fan fully open, well then the pressure is going to be lower because there's more air coming out, so it's going to be coming out at a lower pressure. So you may find that you have to turn that pressure up a little bit as you open that fan up, and vice versa. If you're closing the fan down a little bit, well then you may have to drop the pressure down, and you will also find that in the hotter months to the colder months the pressure will change as well. So I can't really just go and say there is one absolute pressure that you should always be spraying at. I can give you a bit of a guideline and I can tell you what I was using, but yeah, that will vary on what you're doing. I always learnt to spray by feel, and I do recommend that for you guys as well. So this is our second coat of base coat that I'm putting down now. I did not include the entire 2 coats of base coat for this job. It was just going to get a little bit too long for me, and it gets tiring narrating some of those longer painting clips. However, you can get the basic idea of exactly what I'm doing. I will be including all of the painting clips for when I do the body, and I may end up just putting some music over the top of it just to help keep you guys interested, but we'll see how we go. I have done it before where I talk the entire way through painting sessions. Anyway, now we're up to mixing our matte clear up. So as you may have remembered from the very first video, I mixed up a very big batch. I think it was around 4+ liters or maybe even 5 liters of the matte clear, and now I've got that sitting in the bucket of water. I've had that sitting in the bucket of water, so it's at 60 degrees Celsius, and the panel temperature was 17 degrees. So heating the clear up will be helping me in a couple of things. It's going to help it dry. It also helps thin that clear out without putting any thinners in it, so you're keeping a bit of the body. Sometimes if you put too much thinners, or even say 10%, can just break that clear down a little bit. And as far as flash off times goes, with that warmer clear, they're basically non-existent. All I'm going to be doing is going around, and it takes probably 3 or 4 minutes to get from the start to the finish. I'll be able to come straight back and that will be flashed straight off because it's so hot. It's basically baking already when it's coming out of the gun. I find it goes on really nice as well when it's warm. It'll flow out straight away, but then it will flash off, so it's not going to start running. In the colder weather, as you saw, it was only 17 degrees. The chance of getting paint runs will actually greatly increase because it's taking so long for that paint to dry. Once you put it on it, you know, at 17 degrees, if your paint's 17 degrees as well, because the 2-pack paint goes off with the chemical reaction and heat obviously aids it, well then it's going to take a lot longer to go off at that colder temperature. 60 degrees is basically going to flash off straight away. You do still have a bit of pot life. It's not like the paint's going to go hard in your gun within 5 minutes. You've probably got at least an hour. That's also going to depend on the hardener that you're using. In this instance, I use the medium Metalux hardener. Main reason I was using that is because I was just using up some old materials that we had sitting around from some previous jobs, and as far as this goes, it's absolutely fine to use. It's still compatible with the clears that I was using, so that wasn't an issue at all. I probably wouldn't recommend going and putting some U-Pol paint rocket or some of those accelerators into your clear coat that you've heated up, because that probably would start going hard in your gun. If you're using some of those super fast hardeners, well then yeah, you may have some issues, but as long as you're just using normal automotive fast hardener, you should be fine. Before this winter came, I was having a little bit of anxiety knowing that I had a spray booth without heating it. I was getting a bit stressed out thinking, man, how am I going to go? I'm going to be getting runs and it's just going to be terrible. It's going to take so long to dry. And then I remembered about heating my clear up, and I tell you what, winter was a breeze. Some of the best paint jobs I've ever done off the gun came out of this booth during this winter. I did a gold VL Calais in this booth during that winter, heated that Standox Express Premium clear up, and I tell you what, that was an absolutely amazing finish. I used my Sardajet 5000B RP 1.3 and absolutely killed it. I also did my own VL turbo and I flow coated that, and that thing came up pretty amazing. For an off the gun finish, you don't get much better than that. So good results can be achieved out of average spray booths and vice versa. Average results can definitely be achieved out of really good spray booths. Trust me, I've seen a lot of that over the years, and I've done a few myself, but to be honest, in the smash repair industry and even in the restoration industry, which is what we've been doing this year, I'm actually pretty good for my rework rate, and even when I do have to redo something, I know how to go about it the correct way so that I don't make a bigger mess out of it. So troubleshooting and rectification is actually one of my strong points as well. I've always been the one that the boss does come to when they get a problematic job. If they get a real fussy customer, they'll come straight to me and say, mate, I need you to do this job and make sure it's 100% perfect, because I know the customer's going to be really fussy about it, and 99% of the time I do get results that will keep the bosses happy, which is why I can demand top dollar and the bosses will actually happily pay for it. Even though I'm usually one of the most highest paid tradesmen they have in their workshop, they're still always happy to pay that because they get that much work out of me. The productivity is definitely there, and if this YouTube channel is anything for you guys to go off, with nearly 300 videos under 2 years, I've decided that my 300th video will actually be a moving to Thailand video. I've had a few people ask that they said it would be pretty cool to do a video on you moving to Thailand, so I've got a bit of footage there. I'll put it all together, and the 300th video, I will see if I can fit that in with my 2nd anniversary, which is coming up soon too. My first video as the Gunman was uploaded on the 6th of February 2014, so nearly 2 years. And as long as you guys keep watching, giving the thumbs up, commenting, and giving me great feedback on every single video I make, well then I will continue making videos for you guys. I think it's actually been great for me to leave the smash repair industry and start doing a bit more of this restoration work. Even just as far as this YouTube channel goes, I felt like my videos were getting quite same towards the end of working where I used to work at the smash shop, and then even after a year of doing this resto work, same thing, they were getting quite same. I've done it, I've done that. Next stage is going to be hopefully a bit more custom work, but that's not all 100% set in stone at this point. Plans have changed a little bit, but you guys will be following along for the ride no matter what I do, and no matter what I do, I will continue painting. I've been off painting for 2 weeks and I'm already missing it. This is the car in the condition that it did leave us. Make sure you tune in for the next video, and we'll be continuing on right where we picked up, and we'll start getting some color onto the body. Be sure to go over and check out the gunman.net.au, where I've been categorizing every single one of my videos, creating blogs, and making it easy for you guys to be able to access the best of my videos in one spot. Now you've seen this video, get out there and paint some shit. Or as we say here in Thailand, Lang Jak Si Kun Sexy Gandu video. Bye la bye si Sawatdi Cup. Thanks for watching, and this has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.